My name is Madison Claire Thompson, and I'm 21 years old. Right now, I'm driving my father's silver Mercedes-Benz C-Class down the interstate toward Los Angeles at 2 in the morning, and I can barely see the road through my tears. Just 3 hours ago, I was supposed to be celebrating the most important birthday of my life with 50 of my closest friends at a rooftop restaurant in Santa Monica. Instead, I'm fleeing my own home because my parents chose my spoiled sister's fake tantrum over me. I never thought my own parents would choose my spoiled sister over me on the most important birthday of my life. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you won't believe what my sister did next and how I finally stood up for myself. Growing up in Beverly Hills, I always knew my family had money, but I never realized how much that wealth would become a weapon against me. My father, Richard Thompson, built a real estate empire from nothing and now owns one of the most successful commercial property companies on the West Coast. My mother, Catherine, graduated top of her class from Harvard Law and works as a corporate attorney for entertainment companies. We live in an 8-bedroom mansion with a sprawling backyard, infinity pool, and a 4-car garage that houses my father's collection of luxury vehicles. But money doesn't buy happiness, and it certainly doesn't guarantee fair treatment. My sister Brittany is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she could walk, she learned that throwing tantrums would get her everything she wanted. While I was expected to maintain a 4.0 GPA, participate in student government, and work part-time jobs to learn responsibility, Brittany coasted through high school with mediocre grades and spent her days shopping on Rodeo Drive with our mother's credit cards. I'm currently finishing my senior year at UCLA, majoring in marketing with a minor in communications. Even though my parents could easily afford my full tuition, they insisted I earn a partial scholarship to build character. Meanwhile, Brittany got a brand new Range Rover for her 16th birthday and has never worked a day in her life. The double standard was so obvious that our housekeeper Maria used to whisper to me in Spanish about how unfair it was. For months, I had been planning my 21st birthday celebration. This wasn't just any birthday, it was my legal coming of age, and I wanted it to be perfect. I researched venues for weeks before settling on Sky Bar, a rooftop restaurant in Santa Monica with stunning ocean views. I personally called and interviewed 3 different DJs, hired a photographer to capture the memories, and even designed custom invitations on my laptop. The total cost came to $8,000, which my parents agreed to cover as my birthday gift. I sent invitations to 50 people, including my sorority sisters, study group friends, co-workers from my part-time job at a boutique in Westwood, and even some of my high school friends who were still in town. Everyone was excited. My best friend Ashley helped me pick out a stunning emerald green dress that complemented my auburn hair, and I had appointments scheduled for hair and makeup the day of the party. But as the date approached, I noticed Brittany becoming increasingly irritated whenever the party was mentioned. She would roll her eyes when I talked about the details with our parents over dinner, and she made snide comments about how I was showing off and making everything about myself. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was too excited about finally having a celebration that was truly mine. The week before my birthday, the tension in our house became unbearable. Brittany complained constantly that I was getting too much attention and demanded that our parents throw her a party the same weekend to balance things out. When I refused to share my special day, she accused me of being selfish and not caring about family harmony. Our mother started taking Brittany's side, suggesting that maybe we could have a joint celebration, but I stood firm. This was my 21st birthday, something I would only experience once, and I wasn't going to let my sister hijack it. What I didn't know was that Brittany was already plotting something much more sinister than just complaining. She was about to show me exactly how far she was willing to go to remain the center of attention in our family. The first sign that Brittany was planning something came exactly 1 week before my birthday. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I overheard her on the phone with our mother, who was already at work. Brittany was crying crocodile tears, claiming that I had been rubbing the party in her face and making her feel worthless and unloved. She painted herself as the victim, saying that I was deliberately trying to make her feel bad by having such an elaborate celebration. What made this conversation particularly infuriating was that it was completely fabricated. I had barely mentioned the party around Brittany, specifically to avoid conflict. But she had a gift for twisting reality to serve her purposes, and our mother always fell for it. By the time Catherine came home from work that evening, she was already primed to see me as the problem. "Madison, honey, we need to talk," my mother said as she set her briefcase down in the foyer. Her tone was that particular blend of condescension and disappointment that I had learned to dread. "Brittany is really struggling with feeling left out of your birthday celebration. Don't you think you could include her more in the planning?" I explained that Brittany was welcome to attend the party as my sister, but this was my milestone birthday and I wanted to celebrate with my friends. Catherine's response was to suggest that maybe we could have the party at home instead, so it would feel more family-oriented. The idea of turning my sophisticated rooftop celebration into a backyard barbecue made my stomach turn. "Mom, I've already put down deposits, sent invitations, and hired vendors," I said, trying to remain calm. "This party has been planned for months." But Catherine was already mentally rewriting my celebration to accommodate Brittany's feelings. She suggested that maybe Brittany could give a speech, or we could have a special toast to sisterhood, or perhaps Brittany could help choose the music. Every suggestion felt like another way to hand over pieces of my special day to someone who hadn't contributed anything to the planning or cost. My father Richard tried to stay neutral, which in our family dynamic meant tacitly supporting whatever would cause the least drama. He would nod along when I explained my position, then do the same when Catherine advocated for Brittany. His conflict avoidance enabled the dysfunction in our household, but I was too focused on protecting my party to see the bigger picture. Over the next few days, strange things started happening with my party planning. The venue called to ask about a menu change that I never requested. When I questioned them, they said someone claiming to be the event coordinator had called asking about switching from the seafood option to a cheaper chicken dinner. I immediately called back to confirm that no changes should be made without my direct approval. Then my DJ called to say he had received a voicemail asking about canceling the booking. The caller claimed there had been a death in the family and the party was being postponed indefinitely. Fortunately, he was professional enough to call me directly before removing the date from his calendar. I assured him the party was still on and asked him to ignore any calls that didn't come from my personal phone number. The final straw came when I found Brittany in my room, going through the RSVPs I had collected in a decorative box on my dresser. She claimed she was just curious about who was coming, but I caught her taking photos of my guest list with her phone. When I demanded to know what she was doing, she became defensive and accused me of being paranoid. "Why can't I know who's coming to my own sister's party?" she whined, using the wounded tone that never failed to summon our mother's protection. "Because you've been trying to sabotage it all week," I shot back, no longer caring about keeping the peace. Our confrontation brought Catherine running upstairs, and once again, I found myself cast as the aggressor. Brittany dissolved into tears, claiming that I had accused her of horrible things and that she was only trying to be supportive. My mother bought every word of it. "Madison, I'm disappointed in you," Catherine said, putting her arm around Brittany's shoulders. "Your sister has done nothing but try to be involved in your celebration, and you're treating her like an enemy." That night, my father knocked on my bedroom door and asked to speak with me privately. I hoped he would finally acknowledge what was happening, but instead, he asked me to be the bigger person and make peace with your sister. He suggested that maybe I was being too protective of the party details and that including Brittany more might solve the problem. "Dad, she's been calling my vendors trying to cancel things," I said, showing him the notes I had taken from the phone calls. Richard looked uncomfortable with the evidence but wasn't ready to confront the truth about his younger daughter's behavior. "Maybe there were misunderstandings," he said weakly. "Why don't you and Brittany sit down tomorrow and clear the air?" The next morning, Brittany put on a masterful performance. She apologized tearfully for any misunderstandings and claimed she had only been trying to help with party planning because she wanted to be a good sister. She promised to stay out of the arrangements and said she was excited to celebrate with me. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and I remembered the times when we were younger and actually enjoyed each other's company. So I accepted her apology and told her I looked forward to having her at the party. But as I would soon learn, Brittany's apology was just another manipulation tactic. While I thought we had reached an understanding, she was actually finalizing the most devastating sabotage yet. She had been studying my plans, learning my vulnerabilities, and preparing to strike at the moment when it would hurt me most. The countdown to my birthday continued, but instead of excitement building, I felt a growing sense of unease. Something was coming, and every instinct I had was screaming that Brittany wasn't finished with her games. The morning of my 21st birthday dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect California weather that made me believe everything was going to be magical. I woke up early, too excited to sleep any longer, and spent extra time getting ready for what I thought would be the best day of my life. I had planned every detail meticulously, from my morning routine to the final toast at midnight, and nothing was going to ruin it. Brittany was notably absent from breakfast, which actually came as a relief. Our mother mentioned casually that she wasn't feeling well but assured me it was nothing serious, probably just a little stomach bug. I was too focused on my own excitement to pay much attention to this development. At 11, I left for my nail appointment with Ashley, my best friend since freshman year at UCLA. We had planned to spend the morning getting pampered before the real festivities began. Ashley had been my rock throughout all the family drama, and she was almost as excited about the party as I was. "I can't believe you're finally 21, she squealed as we settled into the massage chairs at the upscale nail salon in Beverly Hills. "Tonight is going to be absolutely perfect." We spent 2 hours getting manicures and pedicures, gossiping about our friends' love lives and planning our outfits for the evening. I chose a classic French manicure that would complement my emerald dress, and Ashley got a bold red that matched her fiery personality. Everything felt normal and wonderful, exactly how a birthday should feel. When I returned home at 1:30 in the afternoon, I expected to find the usual quiet house with our housekeeper Maria preparing lunch. Instead, I walked into chaos. Brittany was sprawled dramatically on the living room sofa, clutching her stomach and moaning as if she were dying. Our mother was pacing frantically around the coffee table, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapidly to someone I assumed was a doctor. "Madison, thank God you're home," Catherine said, covering the phone with her hand. "Brittany is having severe abdominal pain. It came on suddenly about an hour ago." I looked at my sister, who was putting on quite the performance. Her face was flushed, her hair was disheveled, and she was curled up in a fetal position, whimpering softly. If I didn't know her history of manipulation, I might have been convinced. "What did the doctor say?" I asked, trying to sound concerned while internally calculating how much time I had before I needed to start getting ready for the party. "He's on his way over," Catherine replied, her voice shaking with worry. "She says the pain is excruciating. She can barely move." My father had apparently cancelled an important business meeting to rush home, and I could hear him in the kitchen making phone calls about emergency room protocols. The entire household was in upheaval because Brittany had suddenly developed mysterious stomach pain. At 3 o'clock, exactly 3 hours before my guests were supposed to arrive at the venue, Dr. Morrison arrived to examine Brittany. He was our family physician, a kind older man who had been treating us since we were children. I watched from the doorway as he gently examined my sister, asking questions about the pain and checking her vital signs. After 20 minutes of examination, Dr. Morrison emerged from the living room looking puzzled. "I can't find anything obviously wrong," he told my parents in a low voice. "Her vital signs are normal, there's no fever, no signs of appendicitis or any other immediate medical emergency. It could be something she ate, or perhaps stress-related." But Brittany wasn't satisfied with this diagnosis. As soon as she heard the doctor's assessment, she began crying hysterically, claiming that the pain was getting worse and that she felt like she was going to die. She begged our parents to take her to the emergency room immediately for more tests. Please, Mommy, she sobbed, using the childish term she only employed during her most manipulative moments. Something is really wrong. I can feel it. What if it's my appendix and it bursts? Catherine was completely taken in by the performance. Despite the doctor's reassurance that there was no indication of appendicitis or any other serious condition, she became convinced that Brittany needed immediate emergency care. And that's when my world began to crumble. Madison, sweetheart, my mother said, turning to me with that expression I knew meant I wasn't going to like what came next. I know this is terrible timing, but we need to postpone your party. Brittany needs to go to the emergency room, and the family should be together during a medical crisis. The words hit me like a physical blow. Postpone? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom, there are 50 people planning to be at Sky Bar in 3 hours. The DJ is setting up, the photographer is on his way, the catering is already being prepared. I understand this is disappointing, Catherine said, but her tone suggested she didn't understand at all. But family comes first. Surely your friends will understand that we had a medical emergency. I looked at my father desperately, hoping he would be the voice of reason. Dad, please. Dr. Morrison said there's nothing seriously wrong. Can't someone stay with Brittany while the rest of us go to the party? Richard's face was conflicted, torn between his desire to avoid confrontation and his recognition that this was devastatingly unfair to me. But in the end, his need to support Catherine won out. Madison, I think your mother's right. We need to prioritize Brittany's health. Her health? I exploded. She was fine this morning. This is my 21st birthday, something that only happens once in my entire life. But my protests fell on deaf ears. Catherine was already making phone calls to cancel various aspects of the party, and Brittany was watching it all unfold with what I could swear was satisfaction glinting in her eyes. I spent the next hour making the most humiliating phone calls of my life, contacting 50 friends to cancel my birthday party 3 hours before it was supposed to start. The venue was sympathetic but couldn't refund the $8,000 deposit. The DJ charged a cancellation fee. The photographer had already driven to Santa Monica and demanded compensation for his time. As I made these devastating calls, Brittany seemed to be feeling much better. I caught her checking her phone and even saw her smirk when she thought no one was looking. That's when I decided to investigate further, and what I discovered would change everything. Hidden behind a throw pillow on the sofa, I found Brittany's phone displaying a text conversation with her friend Jessica. The message thread contained the smoking gun I needed. OMG, it worked. Successfully cancelled Madison's stupid party. She's so pissed and Mom and Dad totally fell for it. Emergency room, here we come, LOL. I screenshot the conversation with my own phone just as Brittany realized what I had found. Her face went white, then quickly morphed into defensive anger. You went through my private phone, she shrieked, but I was already running to show our parents the evidence of her deception. What happened next would test the very foundation of my relationship with my family and force me to make a decision that would change all of our lives forever. The morning of my 21st birthday dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect California weather that made me believe everything was going to be magical. I woke up early, too excited to sleep any longer, and spent extra time getting ready for what I thought would be the best day of my life. I had planned every detail meticulously, from my morning routine to the final toast at midnight, and nothing was going to ruin it. Brittany was notably absent from breakfast, which actually came as a relief. Our mother mentioned casually that she wasn't feeling well but assured me it was nothing serious, probably just a little stomach bug. I was too focused on my own excitement to pay much attention to this development. At 11, I left for my nail appointment with Ashley, my best friend since freshman year at UCLA. We had planned to spend the morning getting pampered before the real festivities began. Ashley had been my rock throughout all the family drama, and she was almost as excited about the party as I was. I can't believe you're finally 21, she squealed as we settled into the massage chairs at the upscale nail salon in Beverly Hills. Tonight is going to be absolutely perfect. We spent 2 hours getting manicures and pedicures, gossiping about our friends' love lives and planning our outfits for the evening. I chose a classic French manicure that would complement my emerald dress, and Ashley got a bold red that matched her fiery personality. Everything felt normal and wonderful, exactly how a birthday should feel. When I returned home at 1:30 in the afternoon, I expected to find the usual quiet house with our housekeeper Maria preparing lunch. Instead, I walked into chaos. Brittany was sprawled dramatically on the living room sofa, clutching her stomach and moaning as if she were dying. Our mother was pacing frantically around the coffee table, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapidly to someone I assumed was a doctor. "Madison, thank God you're home," Catherine said, covering the phone with her hand. "Brittany is having severe abdominal pain. It came on suddenly about an hour ago." I looked at my sister, who was putting on quite the performance. Her face was flushed, her hair was disheveled, and she was curled up in a fetal position, whimpering softly. If I didn't know her history of manipulation, I might have been convinced. "What did the doctor say?" I asked, trying to sound concerned while internally calculating how much time I had before I needed to start getting ready for the party. "He's on his way over," Catherine replied, her voice shaking with worry. "She says the pain is excruciating. She can barely move." My father had apparently cancelled an important business meeting to rush home, and I could hear him in the kitchen making phone calls about emergency room protocols. The entire household was in upheaval because Brittany had suddenly developed mysterious stomach pain. At 3 o'clock, exactly 3 hours before my guests were supposed to arrive at the venue, Dr. Morrison arrived to examine Brittany. He was our family physician, a kind older man who had been treating us since we were children. I watched from the doorway as he gently examined my sister, asking questions about the pain and checking her vital signs. After 20 minutes of examination, Dr. Morrison emerged from the living room looking puzzled. "I can't find anything obviously wrong," he told my parents in a low voice. "Her vital signs are normal, there's no fever, no signs of appendicitis or any other immediate medical emergency. It could be something she ate, or perhaps stress-related." But Brittany wasn't satisfied with this diagnosis. As soon as she heard the doctor's assessment, she began crying hysterically, claiming that the pain was getting worse and that she felt like she was going to die. She begged our parents to take her to the emergency room immediately for more tests. "Please, Mommy," she sobbed, using the childish term she only employed during her most manipulative moments. "Something is really wrong. I can feel it. What if it's my appendix and it bursts?" Catherine was completely taken in by the performance. Despite the doctor's reassurance that there was no indication of appendicitis or any other serious condition, she became convinced that Brittany needed immediate emergency care. And that's when my world began to crumble. "Madison, sweetheart," my mother said, turning to me with that expression I knew meant I wasn't going to like what came next. "I know this is terrible timing, but we need to postpone your party. Brittany needs to go to the emergency room, and the family should be together during a medical crisis." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Postpone?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, there are 50 people planning to be at Sky Bar in 3 hours. The DJ is setting up, the photographer is on his way, the catering is already being prepared." "I understand this is disappointing," Catherine said, but her tone suggested she didn't understand at all. "But family comes first. Surely your friends will understand that we had a medical emergency." I looked at my father desperately, hoping he would be the voice of reason. "Dad, please. Dr. Morrison said there's nothing seriously wrong. Can't someone stay with Brittany while the rest of us go to the party?" Richard's face was conflicted, torn between his desire to avoid confrontation and his recognition that this was devastatingly unfair to me. But in the end, his need to support Catherine won out. "Madison, I think your mother's right. We need to prioritize Brittany's health." "Her health?" I exploded. "She was fine this morning. This is my 21st birthday, something that only happens once in my entire life." But my protests fell on deaf ears. Catherine was already making phone calls to cancel various aspects of the party, and Brittany was watching it all unfold with what I could swear was satisfaction glinting in her eyes. I spent the next hour making the most humiliating phone calls of my life, contacting 50 friends to cancel my birthday party 3 hours before it was supposed to start. The venue was sympathetic but couldn't refund the $8,000 deposit. The DJ charged a cancellation fee. The photographer had already driven to Santa Monica and demanded compensation for his time. As I made these devastating calls, Brittany seemed to be feeling much better. I caught her checking her phone and even saw her smirk when she thought no one was looking. That's when I decided to investigate further, and what I discovered would change everything. Hidden behind a throw pillow on the sofa, I found Brittany's phone displaying a text conversation with her friend Jessica. The message thread contained the smoking gun I needed. OMG, it worked. Successfully cancelled Madison's stupid party. She's so pissed and mom and dad totally fell for it. Emergency room, here we come, LOL. I screenshot the conversation with my own phone just as Brittany realized what I had found. Her face went white, then quickly morphed into defensive anger. You went through my private phone, she shrieked, but I was already running to show our parents the evidence of her deception. What happened next would test the very foundation of my relationship with my family and force me to make a decision that would change all of our lives forever. Look at this. I shouted, bursting into the kitchen where my parents were frantically Googling emergency room wait times. I shoved my phone in their faces, showing them the screenshot of Brittany's text message to Jessica. She planned this whole thing. She's been faking the entire emergency. My mother barely glanced at the screen before dismissing the evidence. Madison, I can't look at this right now. Your sister is in pain and needs medical attention. Mom, read it. I insisted, my voice cracking with desperation. She literally texted her friend saying she successfully cancelled my party and that you fell for it. Richard took my phone and actually read the message, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he absorbed the implications. But before he could respond, Brittany appeared in the kitchen doorway, no longer clutching her stomach in agony. Madison went through my private phone, she announced, immediately going on the offensive. She's so jealous that I'm getting attention that she's making up lies about me. Catherine rushed to Brittany's side without even looking at the evidence. Sweetheart, you shouldn't be up. You need to rest. I don't feel good, but I heard Madison screaming, Brittany said weakly, leaning against our mother for support. She's saying horrible things about me, Mommy. She's claiming I faked being sick. I watched in horror as Brittany transformed back into the helpless victim before our eyes. Her color became pale again, she started breathing shallowly, and she even managed to make herself tear up on command. She edited those text messages, Brittany whimpered, not even trying to deny their existence now that she knew I had screenshots. There are apps that let you fake conversations. Madison is so angry about postponing the party that she's willing to frame her own sister. The accusation was so outrageous that I was momentarily speechless. Are you kidding me right now? I finally managed. You think I have the technical skills to fake text messages in the 5 minutes since I found your phone? Madison, stop attacking your sister when she's clearly unwell, Catherine snapped, her protective instincts completely overriding her logic. I'm disappointed in how selfish you're being. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people not want to attend your parties anyway. The cruelty of that comment took my breath away. My own mother was not only dismissing clear evidence of Brittany's deception but actively attacking my character to defend her. Dad, I turned to Richard desperately. You read the message. You know I didn't fake that. Richard looked uncomfortable, clearly caught between the evidence in front of him and his wife's unwavering support for Brittany. The message is concerning, he admitted carefully. But we need to focus on Brittany's immediate medical needs. Just then, Ashley arrived at our front door, dressed in the gorgeous silver dress she had planned to wear to my party. She had come to pick me up so we could get ready together at the venue, not knowing that my entire celebration had been destroyed. "Madison, are you ready?" she called out cheerfully as she entered through the front door. "The photographer wants us there early for pre-party shots and, what's wrong?" Seeing Ashley in her party dress, excited and beautiful and completely unaware that she had dressed up for nothing, broke something inside me. I burst into tears and had to explain that not only was the party cancelled, but my sister had deliberately sabotaged it. Ashley's expression went from confusion to shock to righteous anger as I filled her in on the details. "Are you serious right now?" she said, staring at Brittany. "You faked a medical emergency to ruin your sister's 21st birthday?" "I didn't fake anything," Brittany protested, but Ashley wasn't buying it for a second. "Madison, show me that text," Ashley demanded. After reading it, she turned to my parents with disgust. "How can you defend this?" She literally confessed to her friend that she was faking it. Catherine was becoming increasingly defensive as more people witnessed Brittany's deception. "I don't appreciate outsiders interfering in family matters," she said coldly to Ashley. "And I won't tolerate anyone accusing my daughter of lying about a medical condition." But Ashley had information that would blow this conspiracy wide open. "Mrs. Thompson, Brittany called several of Madison's friends early this morning claiming there was a family emergency and the party was cancelled. She said someone had died. She was planning this before she even pretended to get sick." The kitchen went silent as this revelation sank in. Even Catherine couldn't explain away the fact that Brittany had been calling my friends with false information hours before her supposed medical crisis began. "That's not true," Brittany said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "I have the call log from Jessica's phone," Ashley continued relentlessly. "She thought it was weird that you called her at 8 a.m. to gossip about canceling Madison's party, so she saved the voicemail you left." I watched my sister's face as she realized her entire scheme was unraveling. In her arrogance, she had created too much evidence and involved too many people. The web of lies was finally collapsing under its own weight. But Brittany had one more card to play, and it was the most manipulative move yet. As she saw that even our parents were beginning to doubt her story, she made a desperate gambit that would reveal just how far she was willing to go to maintain control over our family. "Fine," she screamed, her fake illness dropping away completely as she flew into a rage. "Maybe I did exaggerate feeling sick, but only because nobody in this family ever pays attention to me when Madison is around. She gets all the praise, all the support, all the money spent on her ridiculous parties, and I get nothing." The mask was finally off, but instead of admitting wrongdoing, Brittany was doubling down on her victim narrative. "If you all care more about Madison than me, then maybe I should just hurt myself so you'll finally notice I exist." Catherine gasped and immediately pulled Brittany into a protective embrace, all thoughts of the evidence forgotten. "Baby, don't say things like that. Of course we love you." And with that one manipulative threat, Brittany had successfully redirected all attention back to herself and painted me as the villain for wanting to hold her accountable. My mother was completely under her spell again, cooing reassurances and promising that Brittany was the most important thing in the world. "Madison," Catherine said, turning to me with steel in her voice. "I want you to apologize to your sister right now for accusing her of lying, and then we're all going to the emergency room as a family to make sure she's okay." I stared at my mother in complete disbelief. Even with overwhelming evidence of Brittany's deception, she was demanding that I apologize and participate in extending the fake emergency even further. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I will not apologize for telling the truth, and I will not spend my 21st birthday sitting in a hospital waiting room for a made-up illness." Catherine's face hardened with an expression I had never seen before. "If you don't apologize to Brittany and support this family during a crisis, then you can find somewhere else to live. I won't have a daughter who cares more about parties than her sister's well-being." The ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My own mother was threatening to disown me unless I played along with my sister's manipulative charade. After 21 years of giving my family my best effort, my academic achievements, my respect and love, I was being asked to choose between my integrity and my home. The choice was easier than I thought it would be. I walked upstairs to my room and began packing a bag, my hands shaking with adrenaline and heartbreak. I could hear Ashley downstairs trying to reason with my parents, explaining how unfair they were being, but their responses were becoming increasingly hostile toward anyone who challenged their protection of Brittany. As I threw clothes and essential items into my largest duffel bag, I remembered something my father had promised me 2 years ago when I made Dean's List for the 3rd consecutive semester. "When you graduate, Madison, I'm going to give you the Mercedes. You've earned it through your hard work and responsibility." Graduation was still 3 months away, but I had already earned that car through years of academic excellence and mature behavior. If my parents were kicking me out for refusing to enable my sister's manipulation, then I was taking what was rightfully mine. I finished packing and headed downstairs, where the drama was still unfolding. Richard was trying unsuccessfully to mediate between Catherine's demands and Ashley's logical arguments, while Brittany sat smugly on the sofa, no longer bothering to pretend she was in pain. "Where are you going?" Catherine demanded as she saw my packed bag. "You told me to find somewhere else to live," I replied calmly. "So that's what I'm doing." I walked past them all to the kitchen, where the keys to my father's cars hung on a wooden rack beside the garage door. Without hesitation, I took the keys to the silver Mercedes C-Class. "Madison, that's my car," Richard called out as he realized what was happening. "You promised it to me when I graduated," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "I think I've more than earned it." Catherine was screaming threats about calling the police for theft, but Richard held up a hand to stop her. He looked at me for a long moment, conflict written across his face, before nodding slowly. "You're right," he said quietly. "You have earned it." Brittany erupted into a fresh tantrum, demanding that our parents stop me from leaving and take her to the emergency room immediately. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what my sister wanted. I walked out of that house with my head held high, Ashley following close behind to make sure I was okay. As I started the Mercedes and pulled out of our circular driveway, I could see my family through the large front windows, still arguing about whose feelings mattered most. But I wasn't looking back anymore. For the first time in my life, I was driving toward a future where my worth wasn't determined by how well I accommodated other people's manipulation. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was finally mine to choose. The weight of what I had just done hit me as I sat in the Mercedes in our driveway, engine running, Ashley in the passenger seat looking as shocked as I felt. Through the large bay windows of our house, I could see my family in heated discussion, Brittany gesticulating wildly while our mother comforted her and our father stood with his hands on his hips looking defeated. "Madison, are you sure about this?" Ashley asked gently, her voice full of concern. "I mean, I totally support you standing up for yourself, but taking your dad's car." "He promised it to me," I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. 2 years ago when I made Dean's List again, he said when I graduate, the Mercedes would be mine because I had earned it through hard work and responsibility. Well, I think getting kicked out for refusing to enable my sister's lies counts as a graduation of sorts. Through the window, I could see Catherine pacing frantically, phone pressed to her ear. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know she was calling someone, probably the police, threatening to report the car as stolen. The thought sent a chill through me, but Richard was shaking his head and holding up his hands, clearly telling her not to make that call. My father caught sight of me sitting in his car and walked outside, approaching the driver's side window. I rolled it down, prepared for another confrontation, but his expression was more resigned than angry. "Madison, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But taking my car isn't going to solve anything. Come back inside and let's try to work this out as a family." "A family?" I laughed bitterly. "Dad, my own mother just threatened to disown me because I won't apologize for telling the truth about Brittany's manipulation. That's not a family. That's a hostage situation." Richard's face crumpled slightly as he absorbed the accuracy of my words. "Your mother is just protective of Brittany. She's worried about her mental health." "What about my mental health?" I shot back. What about the fact that your younger daughter just deliberately destroyed the most important birthday of my life and is facing zero consequences? What about the $8,000 in deposits that are gone forever because I had to cancel everything? He had no answer for that, because there was no reasonable defense for what had happened. Brittany had committed a calculated act of sabotage, our mother had enabled it completely, and I was the one being punished for refusing to play along. The car was promised to me, I continued, my voice steadying as my resolve strengthened. I've maintained a 4.0 GPA, I've worked part-time jobs, I've never asked for handouts or thrown tantrums to get what I want. If you want to side with Mom and Brittany in their delusion, that's your choice. But I'm taking what's rightfully mine and leaving. Before he could respond, Catherine appeared beside him, her face flushed with anger. Madison Claire Thompson, you will return that car immediately and come inside to apologize to your sister. No, I said simply, and the power of that single word was intoxicating. I'm 21 years old. I'm not a child you can order around anymore. If you drive away in that car, you are stealing it. Catherine shouted. I'll have you arrested. Actually, you won't, Richard said quietly, and both Catherine and I turned to stare at him in surprise. I promised Madison the car when she graduated. She's right, she has earned it. And honestly, Catherine, after what we've witnessed today with Brittany's behavior, maybe we should be asking ourselves some hard questions about how we've been parenting. Catherine's jaw dropped open in shock that her husband was not automatically supporting her position. Richard, you cannot be serious right now. Your daughter is stealing from us. My daughter is taking something I promised her after years of responsible behavior, he corrected. And frankly, I'm starting to think she's the only one in this family who has any integrity left. The admission hung in the air like a revelation. For the first time in my life, my father was acknowledging the dysfunction in our household dynamics instead of just trying to keep the peace. But Catherine wasn't ready to face that truth. If you support this theft, if you let her manipulate you into giving her that car, then you're choosing Madison over your own wife and younger daughter. And there it was, the ultimatum that would force Richard to decide whether he was going to continue enabling the toxic family patterns or finally stand up for what was right. I watched his face carefully, prepared for disappointment but hoping for courage. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone, Richard said slowly. I'm choosing to acknowledge reality. Brittany deliberately sabotaged Madison's birthday party, lied about being sick, and manipulated this entire family. Madison has done nothing wrong except refuse to pretend otherwise. Catherine stared at her husband as if he had become a stranger, and perhaps in that moment, he had. For 23 years of marriage, Richard had been the accommodating spouse who avoided conflict and let Catherine take the lead on parenting decisions. But the evidence of Brittany's deception was too overwhelming, and the injustice to me too obvious, for him to maintain his neutral stance any longer. Behind them, I could see Brittany watching from the living room window, and for the first time since her tantrum began, she looked genuinely worried. Her nuclear manipulation tactic of threatening self-harm had backfired by forcing our father to finally see the dynamic clearly. Get out of that car right now, Madison. Catherine screamed, but her voice was losing authority as it became clear that Richard wasn't going to support her ultimatum. I love you, Mom, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I won't be part of this dysfunction anymore. When you're ready to have a real conversation about Brittany's behavior and treat me with the respect I deserve, you know where to find me. I rolled up the window and put the car in reverse, backing out of the driveway as Catherine pounded on the hood and shouted threats. Ashley gripped my hand tightly as we drove away, both of us silent as the weight of what had just happened settled over us. Where are we going? Ashley finally asked as I turned onto Sunset Boulevard, the familiar streets of Beverly Hills passing by in a blur. I don't know, I admitted, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. Maybe back to my dorm. Maybe just drive for a while. I need to think. We ended up at the Santa Monica Pier, sitting in the Mercedes in a parking lot overlooking the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks that should have been the backdrop for my birthday celebration. Instead of toasting with 50 friends at Sky Bar, I was sitting in my father's car, having been essentially exiled from my family for refusing to enable my sister's manipulation. "I can't believe they chose her," Ashley said quietly, staring out at the waves. "Even with all that evidence, even with proof that she planned the whole thing, they still chose to protect her instead of you." "It's not really about choosing," I said, finally understanding something that had taken me 21 years to see clearly. "It's about maintaining the family system that works for them. Brittany gets to be the helpless victim who needs protection, Mom gets to be the heroic rescuer, and Dad gets to avoid conflict by staying neutral. My role was supposed to be the responsible one who never complains and always accommodates everyone else's needs." The realization was both devastating and liberating. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' love and respect through achievement and good behavior, not understanding that the family dynamic actually required me to remain in a subordinate position. The moment I stood up for myself and refused to play my assigned role, the whole system turned against me. My phone had been buzzing constantly with texts and missed calls, but I hadn't been ready to deal with any of it. Finally, I looked at the notifications and saw messages from family friends who had heard about the medical emergency, texts from party guests confused about the cancellation, and several increasingly frantic voicemails from my mother demanding I return home immediately. There was also a text from an unexpected source, my father's business partner and older brother, Uncle George. "Madison, heard about what happened tonight. If you need anything, call me. Your dad filled me in on the real story and we're both disgusted by how you've been treated." The message brought tears to my eyes because it meant I wasn't completely alone. Uncle George had always been kind to me, and unlike my parents, he had no investment in protecting Brittany's image or maintaining family dysfunction. "Ashley, I think I need to be alone for a while," I said, wiping my eyes. "This is a lot to process, and I don't want to drag you into my family drama any more than I already have." "Are you kidding me?" she replied fiercely. "You're my best friend. There's nowhere I'd rather be than supporting you through this. But I understand if you need space to think." I drove Ashley back to her apartment and promised to call her in the morning, then found myself driving aimlessly through Los Angeles as night fell over the city. The Mercedes handled beautifully, and there was something deeply satisfying about controlling this powerful machine that represented my father's promise to reward my achievements. As I drove, I thought about all the birthday parties I had attended for friends where their families celebrated them with joy and pride, never making them compete for attention or apologize for wanting to feel special. I thought about the thousands of dollars that had been lost because of Brittany's selfish manipulation, money that could never be recovered because of her need to remain the center of attention. But most of all, I thought about the fact that I was finally free to make decisions based on my own values instead of constantly accommodating other people's dysfunction. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about keeping peace in the family or managing anyone else's emotions. The road stretched out ahead of me, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with my family's expectations or limitations. And while the pain of their rejection was real and sharp, underneath it was a growing sense of excitement about discovering who Madison Thompson could become when she stopped trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. The next 3 days passed in a surreal haze of freedom mixed with profound loneliness. I had moved back into my UCLA dorm room, which felt strange after spending most of my senior year living at home to save money. My roommate had graduated early and moved out, so I had the space entirely to myself, which was both blessing and curse. The silence gave me time to think, but it also amplified the emotional echoes of what had happened. My phone had become a source of anxiety rather than connection. Catherine left increasingly demanding voicemails, starting with threats about the car and escalating to emotional manipulation about how I was destroying the family by being stubborn and selfish. She insisted that Brittany was devastated by my accusations and that I needed to come home immediately to repair the damage I had caused. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was being blamed for damaging the family by refusing to enable the person who had actually caused the destruction. But that's how dysfunction works, the person who points out the problem becomes the problem. Richard's messages were gentler but equally problematic. He acknowledged that Brittany had made mistakes but kept pushing for family reconciliation without addressing the fundamental issues. His texts talked about moving past this and healing as a family, but never mentioned consequences for Brittany's behavior or changes to prevent future manipulation. The most painful part was watching how my friends reacted to the situation. Word had spread quickly through our social circles about the cancelled party and family drama. Some friends were completely supportive, expressing outrage at how I had been treated and offering places to stay or emotional support. But others seemed uncomfortable with the conflict and began distancing themselves from what they saw as family drama. I discovered that Brittany had been busy controlling the narrative on social media. She posted vague but manipulative messages about family health scares and how grateful she was for her parents' unconditional love and support during difficult times. The subtext was clear to anyone who knew our family: she was painting herself as a victim while making me look like the unsympathetic daughter who abandoned the family during a crisis. Several mutual friends from high school reached out with concerned messages that revealed how effectively Brittany was manipulating public perception. "Hey Madison, heard about your sister's emergency. Hope she's okay and that you guys can work things out." These well-meaning messages made it clear that people believed Brittany's version of events, where she was genuinely ill and I was the selfish sister who cared more about parties than family. The social isolation was harder than I had expected. UCLA's campus felt different when I was living there out of necessity rather than choice. I found myself skipping classes for the first time in my college career, not because I couldn't handle the coursework, but because facing people and pretending everything was normal felt impossible. Ashley remained my steadfast ally, bringing me coffee and meals when I forgot to eat, sitting with me in my dorm room as I processed the enormity of what had happened. She was furious on my behalf in a way that felt validating after days of being gaslit by my family. "I've been thinking about this nonstop," she said as we sat on my narrow dorm bed, sharing takeout Chinese food. "What Brittany did wasn't just mean or selfish. It was calculated psychological warfare designed to destroy your special day and make you look like the bad guy for being upset about it." Her analysis helped me understand that I wasn't overreacting to what some people might dismiss as sibling rivalry. Brittany's behavior had been methodical and deliberate, planned in advance and executed with precision timing to cause maximum damage. But the validation from Ashley couldn't completely offset the growing sense that I had lost more than just a birthday party. I had lost my family, my home, and my sense of belonging in the community I had grown up in. The financial independence I thought I had was revealed to be largely illusory. While I had earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs, my parents still covered my housing, car insurance, cell phone, and countless other expenses that I was now responsible for. The stress began affecting my academic performance for the first time in my college career. I missed 2 important classes and forgot about a group project meeting, letting down classmates who were counting on my usually reliable contributions. My professors noticed the change. I had gone from being an engaged student who participated actively in discussions to someone who sat in the back of lecture halls looking exhausted and distracted. Professor Williams, who taught my senior seminar in consumer psychology, asked me to stay after class on Thursday afternoon. "Madison, I've noticed you seem to be struggling lately. Is everything all right? This isn't like you." I appreciated her concern, but explaining that my family had essentially disowned me for refusing to apologize for exposing my sister's manipulation felt too complicated and embarrassing. "I'm going through some family issues," I said vaguely. "I'll get back on track soon." She offered to connect me with campus counseling services, which I initially dismissed but later reconsidered. Maybe talking to a professional would help me sort through the emotional chaos and develop strategies for moving forward. The most unexpected source of support came from Uncle George, who called me Thursday evening while I was studying in the library. His voice was warm and filled with genuine concern as he asked how I was holding up. "Madison, your father told me everything that happened," he said. "I want you to know that Linda and I are absolutely disgusted by how your mother and sister treated you. What Brittany did was cruel and manipulative, and you had every right to stand up for yourself." Hearing validation from an adult family member felt like receiving oxygen after being underwater. Thank you, Uncle George. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy for thinking what happened was as bad as it felt. You're not crazy at all, he said firmly. In fact, Linda and I have been talking, and we'd like you to consider coming to work for our marketing firm. We've been impressed by your academic performance and think you'd be a valuable addition to our team. It would be part-time now so you can finish school, then full-time after graduation. The job offer was unexpected and incredibly generous. Uncle George owned a successful boutique marketing agency that worked with high-end clients throughout California. Working there would give me professional experience, financial independence, and a chance to prove myself in a merit-based environment. I don't know what to say, I admitted. That's an amazing opportunity, but I don't want to cause problems between you and Dad. Let me worry about Richard, Uncle George said with a chuckle. He knows I'm right about this situation, even if he's not ready to fully stand up to Catherine yet. Besides, this is a business decision based on your qualifications, not family politics. As I walked back to my dorm that night, I felt the first stirring of hope I had experienced since my birthday disaster. Uncle George's offer represented more than just a job, it was proof that my worth wasn't determined by my family's dysfunctional dynamics. There were people in the world who could see my value without requiring me to diminish myself to accommodate someone else's manipulation. But even with this new opportunity on the horizon, I was still grappling with the fundamental questions that had been raised by my family's rejection. How do you rebuild your sense of self when the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally chose to protect your abuser instead? How do you trust your own judgment when you've been gaslit so extensively that you start questioning your own reality? The Mercedes sat in the student parking lot like a silver reminder of the bridge I had burned. Every time I saw it, I felt a complex mixture of pride, sadness, and determination. It represented my refusal to be manipulated, but it also symbolized the cost of maintaining my integrity. I was learning that standing up for yourself sometimes means standing alone, at least initially. The people who truly care about your well-being will support your decision to reject abuse, even when that decision is difficult or costly. But those who benefit from your compliance with dysfunction will punish you for asserting your worth. As I fell asleep in my narrow dorm bed that night, I made a resolution that would guide all my future decisions. I would never again accept treatment that required me to betray my own values or enable someone else's harmful behavior. The road ahead might be challenging, but it would be authentically mine. The job at Uncle George's marketing firm started the following Monday, and from my very first day, I felt like I had entered a different universe. Morrison Marketing Group occupied a sleek office building in Century City, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering stunning views of Los Angeles. The environment was professional, collaborative, and refreshingly free of the emotional manipulation that had characterized my family interactions. Uncle George introduced me to the team as my talented niece Madison, who's going to help us with our digital marketing initiatives. There was no mention of family drama, no walking on eggshells around sensitive topics, just straightforward recognition of my skills and potential contributions. My first assignment was developing a social media strategy for a boutique hotel chain that wanted to target millennial travelers. It was exactly the kind of project I had dreamed about working on, combining market research, creative content development, and data analysis. For the first time in weeks, I felt intellectually engaged and excited about the future. The work came naturally to me, and I found myself staying late to perfect presentations and research additional strategies that might benefit the client. Uncle George noticed my dedication and began giving me increasingly complex projects that challenged my abilities and expanded my professional skills. "You have excellent instincts for this work," he told me after I presented a campaign that resulted in a significant increase in the hotel's booking rates. "I'm not saying this because you're family. I'm saying it because it's true. You understand consumer psychology in a way that can't be taught." The professional validation was intoxicating after months of having my perspective dismissed and my achievements minimized at home. Here, my ideas were valued, my work ethic was appreciated, and my success was celebrated without anyone feeling threatened or trying to undermine my confidence. But even as my professional life began flourishing, the personal aftermath of my family crisis continued to unfold in complicated ways. Britney escalated her social media campaign, posting carefully crafted messages that painted me as the daughter who abandoned the family during a health crisis. She shared throwback photos of us as children with captions about missing better times and hoping for healing and forgiveness. The posts were masterfully manipulative, designed to generate sympathy for Britney while making me look heartless and selfish. People who didn't know the full story began reaching out with concerned messages, asking if I was okay and hoping I could work things out with your sister. I made a strategic decision not to engage in the social media battle. Defending myself publicly would only feed into the drama and give Britney more opportunities to play the victim. Instead, I focused on building a life that spoke for itself through actions rather than words. Dr. Sarah Chen, the therapist I had finally decided to see, helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my family relationships and develop strategies for moving forward. Our sessions took place in her comfortable office near campus, and she had a calm, analytical approach that helped me process the emotional chaos without drowning in it. What you're describing is a classic scapegoat and golden child dynamic, Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions. Britney learned early that she could maintain her favored position by creating drama that forced you into the role of either enabler or villain. When you refused to enable her behavior, she had no choice but to cast you as the villain to maintain the family system. The psychological framework helped me understand that my family's reaction wasn't really about the specific incident of my birthday party. It was about my refusal to continue playing the role that kept their dysfunction functioning smoothly. Your parents weren't protecting Britney from your accusations, Dr. Chen continued. They were protecting themselves from having to confront the fact that they had enabled and rewarded manipulative behavior for years. Acknowledging that Britney deliberately sabotaged your birthday would force them to question their entire approach to parenting. The insights from therapy helped me develop emotional boundaries that protected my well-being while I continued building my independent life. I learned to recognize when I was being manipulated and how to respond with facts rather than emotions when family members tried to guilt me into compliance. Ashley remained my closest friend and strongest supporter, but I was also developing new relationships that weren't tainted by family drama. Daniel Martinez, a fellow senior in the engineering program, started joining Ashley and me for study sessions at the library. He was quiet, intelligent, and had a dry sense of humor that made me laugh even during my most difficult days. Daniel's family had immigrated from Mexico when he was young, and he had worked multiple jobs throughout college to support himself and send money home to his parents. His perspective on family loyalty was different from mine. He understood that sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their behavior rather than enabling their dysfunction. My little brother went through a phase where he was getting into trouble at school and lying to our parents about it, Daniel told me one evening as we walked across campus after studying. I could have covered for him to keep peace in the family, but instead I told my parents the truth. He was angry at me for months, but eventually he got the help he needed and turned his life around. Sometimes being a good sister means refusing to enable bad behavior. His matter-of-fact approach to family accountability was refreshing after years of being told that loyalty meant never questioning anyone's actions or holding them responsible for the consequences of their choices. Our friendship gradually deepened into something more romantic, and I found myself experiencing the kind of relationship I had never thought possible. Daniel supported my ambitions without feeling threatened, encouraged my independence without trying to control me, and valued my perspective without needing to minimize his own worth in comparison. But my newfound happiness and success only seemed to fuel Britney's need for attention and revenge. 3 months after my birthday disaster, she showed up unannounced at Morrison Marketing Group, determined to create a scene that would force me back into family drama. I was presenting a quarterly review to our team when the receptionist knocked on the conference room door. "Madison, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your sister and it's a family emergency." My heart sank as I excused myself from the meeting and walked to the lobby, where Britney stood in designer jeans and a flowing blouse, looking perfectly healthy and playing the role of concerned family member. "Madison," she exclaimed loudly, drawing attention from everyone in the vicinity. Thank God I found you. We've been so worried since you disappeared with Daddy's car. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Brittany managed to convey relief, concern, and hurt all in one perfectly modulated sentence. To the casual observer, she looked like a loving sister who had been desperately searching for her missing family member. "What are you doing here, Brittany?" I asked quietly, hoping to avoid a public spectacle. "I'm here because I love you and miss you," she said, her voice carrying just the right amount of emotion to convince onlookers that she was sincere. "Mommy is heartbroken that you won't return her calls, and Daddy feels terrible about the misunderstanding with your birthday party." The phrase misunderstanding was particularly galling. She was still trying to minimize her deliberate sabotage as some sort of innocent mistake. But I had learned from Dr. Chen how to respond to manipulation with facts rather than emotions. "Brittany, there was no misunderstanding," I said calmly. "You deliberately faked a medical emergency to cancel my 21st birthday party, then lied about it when confronted with evidence. I'm not interested in pretending that didn't happen." Her mask slipped slightly as she realized I wasn't going to be drawn into the drama she was trying to create. "Madison, how can you be so cold? We're family. Family forgives each other and moves on. Family also takes responsibility for their actions and makes amends when they hurt each other," I replied. "When you're ready to do that, we can talk. Until then, please don't come to my workplace." Uncle George appeared at my shoulder, having heard the commotion from his office. His presence was reassuring and authoritative as he assessed the situation with the sharp business instincts that had made him successful. "Brittany, isn't it?" he said politely but firmly. "I'm George Thompson, Madison's employer. I understand you're concerned about your sister, but this is a professional environment. Family discussions should take place outside of work hours." Brittany tried to explain that this was an emergency that couldn't wait, but Uncle George wasn't buying her performance. He had witnessed too much corporate manipulation to be fooled by her tactics, and his protective stance made it clear that I had allies who wouldn't tolerate her behavior. "If you need to reach Madison, I suggest calling her directly rather than disrupting her workplace," he said with the kind of polite authority that left no room for argument. Frustrated that her public scene wasn't having the desired effect, Brittany resorted to her nuclear option. "Fine, if that's how Madison wants to treat her family, then everyone should know what kind of person she really is." But instead of generating sympathy, her outburst only made her look unstable and manipulative to the professionals who witnessed it. Uncle George's employees were intelligent, educated people who recognized emotional manipulation when they saw it. As Brittany stormed out of the building, Uncle George turned to me with an expression of disgust. "Now I understand why you left home. That level of drama and manipulation would be toxic for anyone." The incident was embarrassing, but it also served an important purpose. It demonstrated to my new professional community that I was dealing with genuinely unreasonable family members rather than being dramatic about normal sibling conflicts. The support I received from Uncle George and his team reinforced my decision to prioritize my own well-being over family peace. That evening, I blocked Brittany's number and all her social media accounts. I was done allowing her to intrude on the life I was building and poison my relationships with her need for attention and control. The boundaries I had learned about in therapy weren't just concepts anymore, they were practical tools for protecting my peace and progress. The first crack in my family's united front came 6 weeks after Brittany's disastrous appearance at my workplace. Richard called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion and something that sounded like defeat. It was the first time I had spoken to him since the night I left home with the Mercedes, and I could hear the weight of accumulated stress in every word he spoke. "Madison, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "Not about you coming home or apologizing or any of that. I need to tell you what's been happening here since you left." I was sitting in my dorm room, textbook spread across my desk as I worked on a final project for my consumer behavior class. Daniel was studying nearby, and he looked up with concern as he noticed the tension in my voice when I answered the phone. "Okay," I said carefully, not sure what to expect from this conversation. "Your mother found $800 missing from her purse last week," Richard continued. When she confronted Brittany about it, Brittany claimed she had borrowed the money for textbooks and would pay it back. But when Catherine called the community college to verify Brittany's enrollment, she discovered that Brittany dropped all her classes 6 weeks ago and never told us. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising. Brittany had never shown much interest in academic achievement, but the deception and theft represented an escalation in her behavior that even our enabling parents couldn't ignore. She's been leaving the house every morning pretending to go to school, Richard said, his voice filled with bewilderment. We have no idea what she's been doing with her time or where the money went. When we confronted her with the evidence, she had a complete breakdown and blamed you. Of course she did. In Brittany's worldview, every consequence for her choices was somehow my fault for refusing to enable her manipulation. She said that your abandonment of the family had traumatized her so severely that she couldn't concentrate on school, Richard continued. She claimed that everything would go back to normal if you would just come home and apologize for the pain you've caused. The audacity of that manipulation was breathtaking, even by Brittany's standards. She had stolen money, lied about attending school, and was now trying to use my absence as justification for her increasingly destructive behavior. Dad, you do realize that's complete nonsense, right? I said, though I wasn't entirely sure he did realize it. There was a long pause before Richard answered. I'm starting to realize a lot of things I should have seen years ago. Madison, I found browser history on Brittany's laptop that shows she researched your birthday venue weeks before her supposed medical emergency. She had looked up their cancellation policies, their phone numbers, even their catering menus. The evidence I had desperately tried to show my parents on my birthday was finally being acknowledged, but months too late to save my celebration or prevent the family crisis that had followed. She planned the whole thing, Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. The fake illness, the timing, even knowing exactly how to manipulate your mother's protective instincts. It wasn't a spontaneous reaction to feeling left out. It was a calculated campaign to destroy your birthday. Hearing my father finally acknowledge the truth was validating, but it also highlighted how much damage could have been prevented if he had been willing to see reality earlier. My birthday was gone, my relationship with my family was fractured, and I had been forced to rebuild my entire life because my parents chose to believe lies rather than confront uncomfortable truths. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because your mother is finally starting to see the pattern too, Richard admitted. Brittany's behavior has gotten worse since you left, not better. She's manipulating Catherine in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. Yesterday she threatened to hurt herself again when your mother set a boundary about credit card spending. The revelation that Brittany was now turning her manipulation tactics on Catherine was almost satisfying. Our mother had enabled and protected Brittany's behavior for years, and now she was experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be the target of that manipulation. The incident that really opened Catherine's eyes happened last weekend, Richard continued. We were having dinner with the Hendersons, you remember Tom and Linda from the country club. Brittany was telling them about your abandonment of the family, painting herself as the victim of a cruel sister who chose parties over family loyalty. I could picture the scene perfectly, Brittany performing her wounded victim routine for a sympathetic audience while our parents sat uncomfortably by. But then Linda Henderson mentioned that she had seen you at the farmer's market with a young man, and that you looked happy and healthy, Richard said. She asked Brittany if she was sure you were really struggling as much as she had implied. That's when Brittany's mask slipped completely. According to Richard, Brittany had flown into a rage at the suggestion that I might be thriving without the family. She accused Linda Henderson of lying, claimed that I was probably faking happiness to hurt the family, and became so verbally aggressive that our parents had to remove her from the restaurant. Your mother was mortified, Richard said. She finally saw how Brittany's need to control the narrative about you had become an obsession. It wasn't grief or concern for family harmony. It was jealousy and a desire to punish you for not playing along with her manipulation. The conversation continued for another hour, with Richard filling in details about the gradual deterioration of their household since my departure. Without me there to serve as Brittany's primary target and enabler by proxy, she had turned her manipulation tactics on our parents with increasing intensity. Catherine had finally agreed to family therapy, not because she fully acknowledged the dysfunction, but because Brittany's behavior was becoming unmanageable even by her standards. The therapist was helping them understand how years of enabling had created a family system where Brittany's emotional needs always took precedence over everyone else's well-being. "I want you to know that I was wrong," Richard said as our conversation neared its end. "I should have supported you on your birthday. I should have held Brittany accountable for her actions instead of trying to keep peace at your expense. You deserved better from us." The apology was meaningful, but it couldn't undo the months of pain and isolation I had experienced as a result of his failure to stand up for me when it mattered most. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad," I replied honestly. "But it's going to take time for me to trust that things have really changed." "I understand," he said. "I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just wanted you to know that we finally see the truth about what happened, and we're working on addressing the problems that made it possible." 3 weeks later, Uncle George told me that Catherine had called him asking for my address because she wanted to write me a letter. The letter, when it arrived, was a carefully worded apology that acknowledged mistakes were made in handling the birthday situation, but still avoided taking full responsibility for the extent of the enabling and emotional abuse I had experienced. It was progress, but it felt too little and too late. The letter read more like damage control than genuine remorse, and I could sense Catherine's continued discomfort with admitting that she had been fundamentally wrong about Brittany's character and motivations. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I didn't owe my parents forgiveness on their timeline, regardless of their newfound awareness of the family dysfunction. "Recovery from this type of emotional abuse takes time," she explained. "You have every right to protect yourself by maintaining boundaries while they work on their own healing." The distance I had maintained from my family allowed me to see clearly how much my life had improved since leaving their toxic dynamics. My grades had recovered and were better than ever, my relationship with Daniel was deepening into something beautiful and healthy, and my work at Morrison Marketing Group was providing both financial independence and professional fulfillment. When Brittany finally entered individual therapy, mandated by our parents after another incident involving theft and lies, I felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that she was finally facing consequences for her behavior, sadness that it had taken so much damage to reach this point. Her therapist apparently diagnosed her with narcissistic personality traits and began working on helping her develop empathy and accountability skills that should have been taught in childhood. The process would be long and difficult, with no guarantee of success, but it was the first real attempt to address the root causes of her manipulative behavior. I chose not to participate in the family therapy sessions that included Brittany. I wasn't ready to be in the same room with someone who had never genuinely apologized for the calculated cruelty she had inflicted on me. My healing required space from her toxic influence, at least until she demonstrated real change rather than therapeutic compliance. But I did agree to limited contact with my parents as they worked on understanding and changing their own patterns. Monthly lunch meetings with Richard, occasional phone conversations with Catherine, carefully structured interactions that allowed for gradual rebuilding while protecting the progress I had made. The Mercedes remained in my possession, now legally transferred to my name as part of my parents' efforts to demonstrate their commitment to making amends. Every time I drove it, I was reminded of the night I chose my integrity over my family's dysfunction, and I never regretted that choice. By the time my graduation approached, I had built a life that was entirely my own, successful, healthy, and free from the manipulation and enabling that had characterized my childhood. The pain of losing my family's unconditional acceptance was real, but it was balanced by the joy of discovering my own strength and worth. 9 months after my 21st birthday disaster, I walked across the stage at UCLA's graduation ceremony to receive my bachelor's degree in marketing, summa cum laude. The sun was shining over Poly Pavilion, thousands of proud families were cheering for their graduates, and I felt a sense of accomplishment that was entirely my own. Ashley sat in the audience along with Uncle George and Aunt Linda, Daniel and his parents, and Dr. Chen, who had become more than just my therapist, she was a mentor who had helped me understand that healing was possible even after profound betrayal. My parents were not there, by mutual agreement. We weren't ready for that level of public reconciliation, and I refused to risk having my graduation overshadowed by family drama. The job at Morrison Marketing Group had transitioned to full-time employment with a salary that allowed me to rent my own apartment in Santa Monica, just a few miles from the beach where I used to come to think during my darkest days. The one-bedroom place wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, decorated with furniture I had chosen and filled with people who loved me for who I was rather than the role I played in their emotional ecosystem. Daniel and I had been together for 6 months, and our relationship continued to teach me what healthy love looked like. He supported my ambitions without feeling threatened, encouraged my independence without trying to control me, and celebrated my successes without needing to diminish them to protect his own ego. When I told him about my family history, he listened with empathy but didn't try to fix everything or pressure me to reconcile before I was ready. My grandmother always said that some people come into your life as lessons, and others come as blessings, he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my small kitchen. Your family taught you important lessons about boundaries and self-worth. Now you get to choose who becomes the blessings. The wisdom in his words helped me reframe my family trauma as education rather than just damage. I had learned to recognize manipulation, establish boundaries, trust my own judgment, and refuse to enable destructive behavior. These weren't skills I would have developed in a healthy family, but they were valuable tools that would serve me throughout my life. My relationship with my parents evolved slowly and carefully over the months following graduation. Richard made genuine efforts to understand how his conflict avoidance had enabled years of dysfunction. He attended his own individual therapy and worked on developing the courage to address problems directly rather than hoping they would resolve themselves. Catherine's progress was more complicated. She eventually acknowledged that Brittany had deliberately sabotaged my birthday, but she struggled to admit the extent of her own enabling behavior. Her apologies were often followed by justifications about her protective maternal instincts or attempts to minimize the damage by describing it as mistakes rather than ongoing emotional abuse. Your mother is having to confront the fact that her parenting approach with Brittany was not just ineffective but actively harmful, Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions. That's a profound challenge to her identity as a good mother, so she's naturally resistant to fully acknowledging the extent of the problem. I learned to accept limited progress rather than demanding complete transformation. Catherine would probably never fully understand the impact of her enabling, but she had stopped protecting Brittany from consequences, which was the most important change. Brittany herself remained in therapy, working on what her psychologist described as developing empathy and accountability skills. The process was slow and often involved setbacks where she reverted to manipulative behaviors when faced with consequences for her actions. She had written me several letters over the months, apologizing for the misunderstanding about my birthday and asking for forgiveness so we could be a family again. The letters showed some awareness that her behavior had been wrong, but they still minimized the calculated cruelty of her actions and focused more on her desire to return to normal than on genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I didn't owe Brittany forgiveness on her timeline, regardless of her therapeutic progress. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself when you're ready to release the anger that no longer serves you, she explained. It doesn't mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean pretending the harm never happened. I wasn't ready for that gift yet, and I had learned to be okay with that reality. My healing didn't depend on Brittany's recovery, and my worth wasn't determined by my willingness to enable her manipulation in the name of family harmony. The most unexpected blessing of my family crisis had been discovering my own strength and resilience. I had survived the loss of my family's unconditional acceptance and built a life that was more authentic and fulfilling than anything I could have achieved while accommodating their dysfunction. My work at Morrison Marketing Group flourished as I developed expertise in digital marketing and consumer psychology. Uncle George promoted me to senior account manager, and I was building a reputation in the industry for innovative campaigns that connected with target audiences in meaningful ways. Ashley remained my closest friend, now working as a social worker helping at-risk teenagers navigate family crises. Our shared experience of my family drama had deepened our friendship and taught us both about the importance of chosen family, the people who love you because of who you are rather than despite your flaws. As my 22nd birthday approached, I planned a celebration that was everything my 21st should have been. A small dinner party with the people who truly mattered, Ashley and her boyfriend, Daniel, Uncle George and Aunt Linda, Dr. Chen, and a few colleagues who had become genuine friends. We reserved a private dining room at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, with sunset views and excellent wine. The guest list was short but meaningful, filled with people who celebrated my happiness rather than competing for attention or creating drama. My parents sent a beautiful flower arrangement with a card expressing their love and hopes for continued healing in our relationship. It was a gesture that acknowledged my birthday without imposing their presence, respecting the boundaries I had established while demonstrating their continued care. Brittany sent nothing, which was actually a relief. Her absence allowed me to celebrate without worrying about manipulation or having to manage anyone else's emotions. As I raised my glass to toast my 22nd year, surrounded by people who loved me authentically, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating night when I drove away from my family home in the Mercedes. To second chances and chosen family, I said, looking around the table at the faces of people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. To learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself. The applause that followed wasn't the sound of 50 party guests celebrating a milestone, but it was infinitely more meaningful. These people knew my story, understood my struggles, and chose to celebrate my strength rather than my compliance. Later that evening, as Daniel and I walked along the beach hand in hand, he asked me if I ever regretted taking the Mercedes and leaving home. Never, I answered without hesitation. Taking that car and driving away from their dysfunction was the moment I chose my own worth over their comfort. It was the beginning of every good thing that's happened since. The Mercedes was still parked in my apartment complex, now completely mine and serving as a daily reminder of the night I chose integrity over enabling. Every time I drove it, I remembered the courage it had taken to reject their ultimatum and create my own path forward. My family relationships might never fully recover from the damage that was done, but I had learned that love without respect is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. The people who truly care about your well-being will support your decision to reject abuse, even when that decision disrupts their comfort. As we walked back toward my apartment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this place. The pain had been real and devastating, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, built relationships based on authenticity rather than accommodation, and created a life that reflected my values rather than other people's expectations. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine to choose. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. What would you do if your own family chose to protect someone who deliberately sabotaged the most important day of your life? Have you ever had to choose between your integrity and keeping peace with people who should love you unconditionally? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes taking the metaphorical Mercedes and driving toward your own worth is exactly the right choice. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships that celebrate your happiness rather than punish your success. Here's to choosing yourself when no one else will.